Hello everybody, the Law and Gnome is here.
Better watch, there's a lot of tough guys around here. Did he tell you?
Today I'm extremely excited because I am finally talking about a movie that I have been mentioning in a lot of my update videos. But the reason why it took me so long to see it was because it finally showed up on Netflix this past weekend. At one point they said it was coming out in September, and then they were saying it was coming out in the beginning of November, but finally on Thanksgiving weekend, Martin Scorsese's newest film, The Irishman, starring Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Joe Pesci, and a slew of other fantastic actors and actresses, has finally showed up on Netflix. There were even a couple of small theaters that were showing it for the sake of making sure that it would get into the Oscar ceremonies of 2020. There was a real temptation for me to see this movie in a very tiny theater near my house, but the first and only experience that I ever had in that theater was absolutely dreadful. And when I want to see movies, especially great movies, I need to make sure that the overall experience in the theater is great. So I was patient and waited for the film to premiere on Netflix. So, just in case you guys don't know a little bit about me in terms of Martin Scorsese, I am a big fan of his work. I love a lot of his films. Some I don't care for, but most of them I do. And I am one of those people who will always go around and say that if I compare Goodfellas to The Godfather, Goodfellas is always the better mob movie in my eyes. It is also the movie that I praise the most and hate Dances with Wolves for that exact reason, but The Irishman is finally here, guys, and I will say that the hype is absolutely authentic and real. This was a truly incredible film, definitely one of Martin Scorsese's best. Now, Martin Scorsese has shown us a lot of the mob life in a lot of his films. Even various kinds of mobs, from the Italian mob in Goodfellas to the Irish mob in The Departed. But one of the few things that he's done in a great deal of these movies is he always likes to show the bad guys just living it up, loving being bad, and doing everything that they do. The Irishman is a little bit different. He's giving us a much more realistic depiction of mob life because, after all, this one is also based on a true story, specifically revolving around Frank Sheeran, who is played beautifully by Robert De Niro, and he plays this Irish blue-collar guy who just one day realizes that he is not making enough money to support his family, and he meets up with this mobster who is played by Bobby Cannavale, and he says that he's got the best steaks, and he decides to take some of those steaks to deliver to Bobby Cannavale's character's place, and he would make a little extra money, and through the fact that he is actually caught possibly stealing, it is because of a lawyer that allows him to walk freely, and this lawyer, who is played by Ray Romano, by the way, happens to be the cousin of Russell Bufalino, who is one of the most notorious mob bosses in the Philadelphia/South Jersey area. And through this, Frank Sheeran develops a true friendship with Russell Bufalino, and that, of course, is played by Joe Pesci, and he is, without a doubt, phenomenal, and this is where The Irishman officially starts to take form. Frank Sheeran becomes the go-to guy for the hit jobs for these mobsters. And it gets to the point where he is introduced to the great legend that is Jimmy Hoffa. And I say that because younger generations don't know who Jimmy Hoffa is, except for the fact that if they do know him, he was a guy who just disappeared in the mid to late 1970s, which is true. And Al Pacino plays Jimmy Hoffa in this movie, and he is also absolutely fantastic as Jimmy Hoffa. And Frank Sheeran is basically roped into Jimmy Hoffa's world, and he also becomes his personal bodyguard. One of the few things that's very interesting about this film is that it is based on a book that is actually written by Frank Sheeran, which is a little bit of a confession, where he said that he is the reason why Jimmy Hoffa disappeared, because he killed him. But isn't actually true. It still remains a mystery. So that pretty much is what The Irishman is all about. And it is fantastic. The direction is beautiful. The characters are absolutely engaging. The story is just so deep and dark, and the thing that I really like the most about this film is that you really see what goes on in the inner workings of the mob, as well as what goes on in the minds of the men who are part of the mob or working for the mob. Collecting payments, making hits, making sure that their families and loved ones are protected. And we see Frank Sheeran aging throughout the years. And that's one of the other things that a lot of people talked about in regards to The Irishman. Some people didn't like the de-aging special effects process where they basically made Robert De Niro look 40 years younger and they made Joe Pesci look 30 years younger, but truthfully, I didn't see it, and it really didn't take away from the movie for me. But the thing that was absolutely astounding was when we saw everything that happened after all of these events took place, years down the line, because the beginning of the film starts with the story being told by Frank Sheeran, and he is telling it in the year of 1996, 1997. I knew that because one of the things that he was watching on the news when he was in the retirement home was the war in Serbia and Bosnia, and that was in the mid-1990s. And the fact that we saw Robert De Niro and the other supporting cast members get de-aged and then get aged even further beyond their years was just an incredible thing to see, and also kind of sad, especially when we saw Frank Sheeran going towards the end of his life, because one of the other main focuses of this film is the relationship between Frank and his daughter Peggy. Peggy is a very quiet girl, and she seems to be the only one that is looking at what's happening, and she just doesn't like what her father is doing. But she doesn't do it by yelling at him. She just gives him blank, unemotional stares and barely even says a word to him. And I think that that is one of the most powerful pieces of this whole movie. And she also is played by Anna Paquin as she gets older, but that was probably the one thing about this movie that I just didn't understand, because Anna Paquin is an astounding actress, and the fact that they basically got her just to be silent for most of the movie, I don't really think you needed to get a big name like Anna Paquin just to say absolutely nothing but maybe 2 lines in the entire film. You could have used a no-name actress, but you know what? You got star power in this movie, because it's not just her. You got Harvey Keitel in this movie as well. So many famous faces are in this film, it's hard to not throw another one in there. We also have a very powerful score by Robbie Robertson, as well as a couple of great classic songs from the 1950s and 60s and 70s. It's a very long film. It's 3.5 hours long, but it's quite impressive to know how fast the time really flies by while you're watching it, because you're very engaged in this film, and you're very engaged in the characters and seeing how each and every one of their individual stories just unfold throughout the decades of this story. And it really is one of the most powerful, dark, and realistic films that I have seen in a very long time, especially when it comes to the underground world of crime. Is this a movie that I would like to see again? Absolutely. Even if it never shows up on DVD, which I really hope that it does, because I would love to get myself a physical copy of this film, because if you don't know my attitude towards the streaming wars at this point in time, I am basically saying to myself that physical media is the way to go at this point in time, because we have no idea what's going to happen in the next couple of years when all of these streaming services start showing up and you have to pay for them, but that's another story for another time. I am anticipating this movie to get a ton of Oscar nominations, from the film itself to the actors portraying the characters, because Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Joe Pesci, they all deserve Academy Award nominations. Martin Scorsese could very well walk away with Best Director of the Year, and even though he already has one under his belt, you know, it would be nice to see him get another one, because I do enjoy The Departed, but I always said that he deserved so much more for Goodfellas than he did for The Departed, but he definitely deserves it for The Irishman. I am going to be giving this movie a 4 stars out of 4. It is absolutely fantastic. Everything that you were anticipating it to be, The Irishman is. So thank you very much for watching, everybody. Please leave your comments in the box below, and let's discuss The Irishman, and I will see you in the next one. Hey, thank you so much for stopping by my channel today. If you're new here and want to see more of what my channel has to offer, please click on the link to my last video, or hit that subscribe button to be kept up to date with all of my uploads. Content of all sorts is posted here quite often, so trust me, you do not want to fall behind. I will see you in the comments, and actions speak louder than words.